Hello, YouTube. Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, today the two books we got on the lineup: Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut and Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinniman. Let's talk about them. I suppose we'll do this in a chronological order that I read the books. So let's talk about Slaughterhouse-Five first. So this was actually a book recommended to me by a friend, another a friendly recommendation read on the channel. Unlike the friend who recommended me The End of Eddie, which I have right here, a memoir type of story. That friend, he's like, he's your educated type of guy, of individual. But this guy, he's literally the scum of the earth. But we all have a friend like that, right? That, they might not be the greatest person, but they get a laugh out of you every now and then. So you stick around with them. All right, so the chances he watches this video are almost zero, but in case he does, that was a joke. Of course, he's a great, educated guy as well, and he's got good taste, and that much was evident in his recommendation of Slaughterhouse-Five because this is one of my favorite books I've probably ever read, and it accomplishes a lot with a little, which is something I have to commend it for as well. Especially someone who's a big sci-fi fantasy guy. It's always nice to see an author who can accomplish a lot with a little, who can do, as much with the 200 page count as some people do with 5 to 6 to 700 pages. And this was a great work. This is probably my favorite anti-war novel now. It was A Farewell to Arms previously by Hemingway, but I read this one. I think it takes the cake. I think Vonnegut's blend of seriousness but also ironic humor, the way he can mix those two, he can make you laugh, but he can also sit you down and show you some sort of aspect of reality of our lives that will have you consider maybe how you approach things, how we perceive things. His ability to do that is astounding. So the book actually opens with a bit of autobiographical section where Vonnegut talks about his process of writing this book, how it came to be. And there is one line here I would like to point to as an example of Vonnegut's subtle but his deep introspection that's woven through this text. So let me go to that page real quick. All right, so here it is. The two little girls and I crossed the Delaware River where George Washington had crossed it the next morning. We went to the New York World's Fair, saw what the past had been like, according to the Ford Motor Car Company and Walt Disney, and saw what the future would be like, according to General Motors. And I asked myself about the present. How wide was it? How deep it was? How much was mine to keep? And we get a lot of just like short, punchy lines like this throughout the book that you kind of like, this is a book that you can sort of run through. Sometimes you have to take a break and sit down with some of these lines and really toss it around that old noggin of yours to think about what is Vonnegut trying to tell me here. And that is something I appreciate with literature. I apologize for that. My cat just scared the shit out of me. He opened the door and I'm currently home alone. But yeah, Slaughterhouse-Five, it really is a great work. One thing I appreciated is, you know, I think the hallmark of the story, the highlight is just that Kurt Vonnegut just really nails it with his portrayal of trauma and post-traumatic stress. He does like a great job of finding a way to accomplish that with maybe a sort of genre bending aspects, right? This is on Sci-Fi Sunday, so there is a science fiction element, but it's more like sci-fi realism or magical realism, where you're sort of debating if is this fantastical science fiction element real or is it just a construct that the character has created to cope with something or is this how the reality has been molded because of the trauma that they've been through. And for Billy Pilgrim, our main character, it is time travel. Or it's space travel as well. Billy Pilgrim is unstuck in time, which means that in the story we jump forward into Billy Pilgrim's story and backwards and to the middle and to the left and the right. We're going to when he's an old man, then we come back to when he was in the war. Then we go back. Then we'll jump to when he was in Dresden with the bombing, and then we'll jump to when he's become an optometrist. And we are told that this is sci-fi, that he's unstuck through time, that the Trifalmadorians on another planet have sort of introduced him to this idea of time not being linear. Time is something that just exists, and humans are special creatures because we experience it uh, like on a timeline, on a scale. Whereas a Trifalmadorian would look at the entire history of the planet Earth more like looking at Mount Rushmore. Like they see it all in one big picture. Um, and so we get this sort of predeterminism skewed to the story, especially early on, because we sort of get this idea. Billy Pilgrim learns from the aliens that you know he frets about things, but everything's already decided. Everything's already been determined and laid out. That's why the Trifalmadorians have a different perspective on life because they've already seen it all. They're not waiting for the next chapter to unfold. They know how it ends. They know everything's already been set up to be a certain way. And that was an interesting point of view that I was into. But I think I want to touch on the whole post traumatic stress topic because um, there's this thing that Kurt Vonnegut does to sort of support the theory that maybe the sci-fi elements and the time travel elements are a construct of the character to cope with his trauma because Vonnegut reuses certain figures of language or like adjectives or descriptors for certain scenarios, right? One that I wrote down was like the ivory feet scene. We uh we understand that as Billy Pilgrim, his first meeting with the Trifalmadorians before they abduct him, he walks and he's walking down through his house. It's cold, and his ivory feet are stepping on the cold tiles. But then later in the story, we get a scene where Billy Pilgrim is being sort of put into a slaughterhouse or basically a concentration camp of a sorts for prisoners of war, and Kurt Vonnegut does it again, where he describes, Billy's feet like looking like ivory or feeling like ivory as he's stepping into it, and he does it one more time as well. I wish I wrote down what page this was on, but I think the fact that we get this descriptor from Billy when he's in the trauma, and he Vonnegut uses the same description when he's experienced the sci-fi stuff. There's an argument there that maybe this is all Billy Pilgrim's, sort of very messed up mental way of dealing with the things that he went through in Dresden. And that I think was is shouts at Vonnegut, man. That guy could write. There's a reason it's a classic, I guess. And to further support this rich tapestry of a story that Vonnegut is weaving, is creating a very sad tale, is that we get this great like in my notes on my phone, I wrote down a great intertwined web of a story. And so like we get all these references from previous parts of his life that are prevalent in other parts of his life, and this sort of builds off of the last topic we talked about. But like for example, when Billy's abducted and he's living on the Trifalmadorian world, and like Hannah Montana or the 1920s 1910s equivalent of Hannah Montana is like living with him on this planet for some reason. They have a family and they grow to love each other or whatever, and then we find out that Billy during his wartime or before the war, he found a picture of this same lady in a soldier's pocket or something like that. The way he found it wasn't really important. I don't remember. It's the fact that he did find it. So this is sort of a construct that was in his mind before it became more prevalent when he was starting to cope and deal with that trauma. And there's multiple examples of that happening in the book where the ivory feet, the famous actress, other things that they it's all connected, and it feeds into the Trifalmadorian philosophy of predeterminism and everything already being determined, everything being set up, and you're just playing, you're just an actor in the play, right? Because or more importantly, seeing the big picture of everything together, and we also kind of get that point of view from the reader when we get the little bits and pieces of the story all connecting, all making one great arc. Uh, so we kind of get the Trifalmadorian perspective, which was just, I don't know, it was a very unique experience, very for me. I understand why they read this. Like it's very popular in the education system. And I think I'll end this the review of Slaughterhouse-Five with a discussion someone was having online. I'm a avid Reddit fan. I'm on Reddit all the time. I'll just go ahead and admit that. Use that information as you will. But someone was sort of talking about maybe what the Tralfamadorians or their perception of time represent, and or Billy Pilgrim's journey through time. And they mentioned that trauma, people in trauma, are also sort of unstuck in time because hold on, I'll write it down. I want to read it word for word because I think it's very like introspective. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I found the quote. Shout out to Frozen Fountain on Reddit. Here it is. The Tralfamadorians exist in all times simultaneously, and so do traumatized people. Experiencing something that shatters your sense of self and every perception you held about the world makes you hyper vigilant to any sign of the event that traumatized you happening again. A part of you remains so stuck in the past that you fear poisons your present and cause you to make bleak projections about your future. PTSD is being unstuck in time. You can read these aliens as a metaphor or take them as a rationalization Billy applies to his flashbacks and hopelessness. And just reading that, I think this or writer here did a great job of putting into words what I'm trying to get across here. Uh, so shout out to Frozen Fountain. That was honestly beautiful. Um, but yeah, so if you couldn't tell, Slaughterhouse-Five, it's a recommended read. Who would I recommend it to? Anyone who likes books and likes reading. Honestly, it's great. I'm trying to think. I mean, maybe if you're not a fan of the classics, typically issues people have with classics is like the writing style is from an earlier time, so the wording, the verbiage, or whatever, uh, it might be unappealing to you. But honestly, it's not that bad in Slaughterhouse-Five either. I'd honestly recommend this book to anybody. It's really I think the iconic line, "So it goes," so it goes. Stuff happens. That's life. That's how it goes. And I'm gonna wait for my father to pass away, and then I'm gonna get that tattooed on my body. So 5 out of 5 stars. All right, the second book on the itinerary for Sci-Fi Sunday this week, Dungeon Crawler Carl. Now, this is a rare example of a book that I actually kind of had lower expectations going into. Um, I got the sense that the genre was lit RPG, so it's sort of like heavily video game influenced style of writing. And I've heard of other stories that did that, like Cradle as well by Will White does that. And honestly, it was something that never interested me too much. I don't know, like I like video games, but I never thought the blend of video game and book would ever turn out to be that well. I kind of had this ignorant perception that mixing video game with book would kind of deteriorate the book experience and make it less literary or whatever. Um, I was very wrong about that. I probably won't dive too deep into this section. I mean, I guess you could have said the same thing for Slaughterhouse-Five, because I'm sure there's a plethora of reviews for both of these books online. But yeah, Dungeon Crawler Carl definitely exceeded my expectation. This is actually another rare example of a book where I enjoyed the audio book more than actually just sitting down and reading it. And for someone who is ADHD pilled as myself, undiagnosed, of course, that's just what the internet told me. It's hard for me to get into audiobooks. The only time I really listen to audiobooks is like if I'm laying on the couch and no one's around me and I have my headphones in, or if I'm driving. I can't even really clean or do tasks like that and be able to focus on the audiobook. But this audiobook, Dungeon Crawler Carl, and the narration by Jeff Hayes, it was amazing. I mean, honestly, this was like the best audiobook experience I've ever had. And I think the genre also helped a lot as well because there was video game elements you could put more into the audiobook than just reading the words. And by that I mean like there was sound effects in the audiobook, like video game sound effects for certain things or for certain dialogue tags. And or like, progressively through the story, Carl and Princess Donut will get achievements. And then in the audiobook, it'll like the voice actor will put on like an electronic voice, and it's like you're actually in the video game. And so, yeah, I had to mention that the audiobook for these books are amazing. So if you are an audiobook person, like I would probably try to check this out because it's a very unique experience, I would say, especially for me compared to the other audiobooks that I've listened to. The writing and prose itself, I wouldn't say is anything too special. I think Matt Didman actually does take advantage of the written format because we get certain selections that are spaced out, put by themselves, and they have different fonts and stuff. to sort of emphasize that something a different speaker is speaking in this type of way, and so he does take advantage of that. So for like the achievements, or like if I guess if it's certain NPCs talking, or if the dungeon announcer is talking, that was something I was interesting about the actual written format, the style that I appreciated. I think another great strength for Dungeon Crawler Carl is, well, I'll say two things, but the greater of the two is definitely the world building. You can tell that Matt Dinniman had a pretty deep world already built by the time he started writing Dungeon Crawler Carl, and the way he feeds you this information is he does like, a textbook job of it, right? He's not gonna sit down for 5 pages and give you the history of the dungeon, how it came to be, all the different corporations and stuff that are feeding into the games and all their politics. He gives you a little bit of it at a time. And it's like feels natural too because our game guide in this game, Mordecai. It's like, well, I could tell you all about this stuff, but what's more important right now is that you learn how the game works and how to survive. So like in a Hunger Games sort of situation. Um, but we do get those bits and pieces from Mordecai and other characters every now and then about um, you know, things happening, the history of the game itself, also things happening outside of the game that influence the results and the impact of the game, just a little bit at a time though, in digestible pieces. And so yeah, the world building here is amazing. So if you're a world building person, definitely check out Dungeon Crawler Carl because Matt David does a great job with that. Now, the lesser strength of the two, and the reason I'm saying it's the lesser strength, is it could also be a weakness, and that's the humor. As someone who is Gen Z or whatever, is terminally online, I thought the humor was pretty funny. This book's pretty hilarious at some points, especially like, for example, the AI video of Carl, just going to Pound Town on the Maestro, whatever. Like that, I just picture that scene was hilarious. I guess that not picturing the scene itself, but like the fact that something like this would be created in this world was funny because like that could probably happen in our world too. So some text to world connection there. But that also I could see this humor not working for people, especially people who aren't maybe terminally on. Maybe if you go outside and you touch grass frequently, maybe the humor won't work for you. Uh, but I thought it was pretty funny. So that's the reason maybe someone wouldn't want to check this book out. The only other knock I can really give to Dungeon Crawler Carl is that it has to do with the way that it was published, right? So Dungeon Crawler Carl was originally self-published, which did transition to traditional publishing. But I think the issue with that, with the self-publishing line, is that this first book doesn't really stand on its own. I couldn't imagine somebody picking up Dungeon Crawler Carl, reading it, and just being sort of satisfied with just that. It's like, Matt Dinniman knew I'm self-publishing this book, so there's no like contract or guideline to if it has to be a trilogy or how many I have to put. I can write the story how I want. And so it kind of gives this book not too great of a conclusion. It doesn't really hit too hard. It's more just like, okay, let's pick up the next book. That's how the conclusion felt to me. They kind of just finished level two, and it's like, oh, spoilers. And they're like, okay, let's go to the next level. But let's pick our character designs first. And then that's kind of where the book ends. We also get bonus content at the end that gives us a perspective of some of the mobs from the first and second floor, which that was like also fed into the world building greatly. But I think the ending was weak because Matt Didman knew that he was going to make the next book. He didn't have to write this book into a way where it can stand on its own. So maybe like some examples I could think of are like Mistborn is a book where you could just read the Final Empire, the first book, and not read the rest, and you'd be all right probably. I mean, that's what I've done. I've tried to get into the second book, but it's been very hard for me. But you can read the first book; it kind of just stands on its own thing. And other fantasy and sci-fi series will do that too. So I guess in case if the first book flops, you don't get a sequel, man. You just got that bug. Move on to a different series. So that would be a knock for Dungeons Card Horror. It does have a weak conclusion. But I already started reading the second book, so it got me. All right, so I'm doing a little bit of theorizing here. So just like this could be the conclusion of the video for you if you don't want spoilers for Dungeon Crawler Carl. But some theories I have coming up. This is definitely I have the feeling this book's going to take the Hunger Games trajectory where it goes from playing in the game to fighting the actual enemy, the people who create the game and run the game. Um, For some reason I since then the AI is eventually going to revolt against the people who use it to run the game or abhorrent or like the top corporations or companies that run Dungeon Crawler Carl. I think it's my main like piece of evidence for that theory is the existence of the like cart lady. I forget her name, but I sort of get the sense that the AI is doing something of its own. It's kind of working on its own. It has a different agenda than maybe what Borant and the other people want to achieve out of the game. I think the AI may eventually revolt and maybe even side with someone like a Carl ahead of the revolution, and we see that because the AI does favor crawlers in certain ways, giving them certain select items and stuff like that. Maybe the AI achieves its own form of consciousness. It starts supporting the crawlers who will revolt against Borant and the people who made the dungeon. Uh, that's just out of left field theory. Obviously, Carl's gonna become a major figure in the Galactic Revolution. And yes, he will still have on the boxer briefs, the hearted boxer briefs. Why he is the figure of the rebellion. Um, but yeah, that's about it for the theories. Hunger Games type of reject trajectory. We're eventually, but maybe not. Maybe we stay in the dungeon the entire time. I think that's probably more accurate because based off of a recent interview I saw with Matt Dinniman, is that like we're gonna go through all the levels, and so the last book I think is gonna be the final couple levels or whatever. So maybe we stay in the dungeon the whole time. I don't know. Just a theory of mine. But that will conclude this installment of Sci-Fi Sunday, ladies and gentlemen. We had two great books this week, so I would suggest reading them both. Uh, Slaughterhouse-Five, Dungeon Crawler Carl, both great reads. Um, and yeah, I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.